Will you rustle quietly and listen to what I have to say now, describing the wet backs of stones, golden mouthed and making no headway? Will you unsilt how the water orders itself like a pack of geese? Goes up first in tatters, then in shreds, then in threads, and shucking its pools crawls into this slate and thin limestone phase 3 hayfields above Buckfast, where annual meadow grasshoppers flower and fly to the tune of ribbed stalks rubbed. Will you swim down and attend to this foundry for sounds? This jabber of Pigeon River, drilling these rhythmic cells and trails of scales, will you translate for me blunt, blink, glint? Is it span of eyes trammelling under the rain-making oaks among stones the colour of magpies? Is it suddenly through a padlocked gate a green lane slip-toes secretly to the unseen steep woods, and cows the far side, and town boys sneak here after school? That was from Dart, a 48-page poem by Alice Oswald, describing the River Dart's sinuous journey from source to mouth. The River Dart, the very river that gives my favourite place its name. Welcome back to the Dartmoor podcast. Oswald's poem is based on conversations with real people met along the Dart, and one of the people mentioned is a wonderful eccentric environmentalist called Roger Deakin. And it turns out that I had his book at home too. It's a book on wild swimming. The book on wild swimming, in fact. Waterlog. It documents Deakin's adventures as he attempts to swim all over the British Isles. The whole book is a beautiful read, full of personality, written with all the charm, poetry and humour of that particular type of daft old hippie you'd expect to find splashing around in a hidden pool. Deakin's passion for wild swimming is completely infectious. And of course, he swims in the Dart. As I was wading through the wonderful whimsy of Waterlog, this extract caught my attention. On Thursday afternoon, I went with my friends under oath of secrecy to a bathing place where the Dart is joined by an unusually cold moorland torrent. We will call it the Sherberton stream. Almost from its source in 2 springs high up beneath the summit of a tor, the torrent rushes headlong downhill, shaded by dense woodland all the way, so the spring water emerges into the Dart as cool as it was underground. The Dart slid like a white glacier into a deep black pool, through a steep-sided valley of oak and holly woods. My friend John and I, wearing masks, snorkels and flippers, dropped straight into deep water off some rocks and swam against the current up into the pool. What we saw there astonished us both. About 10 feet down in the clear water, dappled with sunlight, lay dozens of salmon, many of them well over 2 feet long. They turned and nosed off languidly upstream at our approach, disappearing into the clear green bubbling river or amongst the shadows of underwater rocks. We followed them upriver, then lost them. Coming back downstream in long, effortless strokes, we were ambushed from the left by the sudden shock of the chilly upland waters of the Sherberton stream issuing into the pool. The unusually cold water, rich in oxygen, was the special attraction of this place for the salmon. Sherberton stream, a secret location teeming with giant salmon. I couldn't let that go, could I? Could I find this place? And if I could, would the salmon still congregate there 20 years later? It would certainly be an adventure to find out. Now, as absurdly niche as it might seem, I'm not the first person to try this. A quick Google led me to a blog by a chap called Joe Minihane, called Waterlog Re-Swum, where he recounts swimming in the River Dart near the village of Sherberton. Except I'm pretty sure he was in the wrong place. For starters, our wily merman Roger Deakin surely wouldn't make it that easy to find his hidden stream. And I believe that the popular swimming spot described in the blog was a red herring. It just doesn't add up. Joe's spot lacks the steep oak and holly-sided valley, and furthermore, with a charmingly self-deprecating manner, Joe thinks he was in the wrong place too. Most importantly though, as I was reading Deakin's description of the salmon pool, a little light went on in my head. I think I might actually know where this is. A quick look at the map revealed a subtle connection with the name Sherberton, which cemented the possibility in my mind. I'm not going to tell you where it is, by the way. Far be it for me to ruin the decades-old secret of the late Roger Deakin and his friend. I suppose a few keen-eyed Dartmoor aficionados might be able to work it out from my video, but then I'm capable of throwing in a little deception too. Next, I took a long tumble down the Google rabbit hole and became fascinated by the crazy life cycle of the Dartmoor salmon. The baby salmon hatch from thousands of eggs high up in the shallow, gravelly stretches of the Dart. There they slowly grow to maturity over about 4 years, then undergo a massive physiological change to become capable of surviving in salt water before rushing out to sea to live out their adult life. There, North Atlantic salmon may travel many thousands of miles and grow into voracious predators as they hunt smaller fish in the seas around Iceland and Greenland. They may live out there in the dark and icy seas for anywhere for up to 4 years, and the longer they do, the larger they grow. Then one day, they get the sudden urge to return home. This is the truly extraordinary part. These fish somehow find their way back to the same river they were born in, overcoming incredible obstacles on the way, dodging predators, fighting the currents, and leaping up weirs. Even more insane, they do all of this without eating. You see, once the salmon re-enter their birthing river, they cease to feed. It's as if they know that this is their last journey, their final purpose. After spawning, they weaken and die. If Deakin's giant salmon are still to be found in Sherberton stream, then they will be grizzled veterans of the open ocean returning to their home river for the last time. They will be waiting patiently and fasting through the summer months in the cold, dark, oxygen-rich waters, waiting for a late summer storm to flood the river and allow them to swim the last few miles to their breeding grounds. You won't be surprised to learn that, along with almost all the nature in this country, salmon numbers are declining. In the 80s, an average of 330 fish a year were caught in the Dart. In 2019, just 14. So I was glad to hear that a few things are being done. Just last year, here at the majestic Buckfast Abbey, a set of salmon steps were built to help the creatures navigate a tricky weir on their return to their spawning grounds. I couldn't seem to get to it though. In fact, everything on this journey was more difficult when it first appeared. If Sherberton stream, as Deakin claimed, joined the Dart on the left as you swam down the river, then I would simply need to cross the Dart and walk up the opposite bank until I hit it. Easier said than done. From the direction I approached, the path was very overgrown, and in places it had slipped away and fallen into the Dart. Progress was slow, and I began to worry that I'd overshot and that Sherberton stream had simply dried up in July's drought. But then I found it, just as Deakin had described, a very cold stream trickling down the valley side under the shade of oaks and hollies. Perfect. You could actually feel the difference in temperature here above and below where the stream met the Dart. Would the cold, oxygenated water attract the big fish? The water was a little cloudier than I'd hoped, and it was so cold I only went for a relatively quick dip. But as you can see, there were fish in there. Some of them were definitely salmon, and I saw one quite large fish, maybe a foot long. This is the biggest one I caught on camera, but I think he's a trout due to the spots covering his entire body. Anyway, a moderate success. I found the Sherberton stream and found some reasonably large fish. One quick dip doesn't really prove that salmon have declined here, and maybe on another day I'd have had a similar experience to Deakin. It was a wonderful spot for a swim, so I'll definitely be back. Anyway, there was one last thing Deakin mentioned that I'd like to give a go. John, who has swum here for over 30 years, had never seen this many fish in a pool. He is a geologist, now in his 60s, and during the 1960s and early 70s he had his own flourishing Dartmoor tin mine. He still occasionally pans the river for tin or gold, more for pleasure than profit.